Zubair reports that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be on him, said, "Blessed is he who is guided to Islam, whose livelihood is just sufficient, and he is contented therewith." Whose livelihood is just sufficient, and he is contented therewith. So could you kindly explain what just sufficient means?
Just sufficient means just sufficient.
Yes, I mean how it can be.
I mean, when you make the two ends meet, all his requirements of life are fulfilled by that livelihood. Nothing is left for luxury.
So where we draw the line for luxury and the requirement?
Everybody's line is drawn differently. The circumstances of every society are different. Every individual living in that society are different. Needs and requirements vary in so many ways. Responsibilities vary. The burden on somebody's shoulder vary. His tastes, his way of life, his thinking, his social background, his upbringing, everything is a varying factor. So how can I draw a line between billions and billions of possibilities? It's impossible. But you should understand, in normal terms, that there are requirements and needs. And he knows that when his needs are fulfilled, this the needs are fulfilled, and he's connected. He's not just ambitious, which is beyond getting also all the time, burning his heart for what he does not have. This is what it means. He's blessed by Allah. Because content is a very great blessing of Allah. Content is a great blessing of Allah.
When Hazrat Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Sahib decided that his name should be withdrawn for re-election as a judge of the International Court of Justice in 1973, I wrote a letter to him and asked him whether the chances of his being re-elected were bright or not. He said they were. And then I asked, why have you withdrawn your name? So he wrote a Urdu verse, which I hope I'll be able to narrate correctly. It's from Bedil.
It is from
Bedil. Hirs Khane Nes Varna Hirs Khane Nes Bedil Varna Asbabe Jahan.
Is this Urdu verse?
No, sir. Persian. No, sir. I'll recite again. Hirs Khane Nes Bedil Varna Asbabe I'll recollect this. Hirs Khane Nes Varna Hirs Khane Nes Bedil Varna Asbabe Jahan Aksarash Darkar Darin Harche Maal Darkar Darin Aksarash Darkar Nes Harche Maal Darkar Darin Aksarash Darkar Nes. It's great difficulty. I decided this in Persian.
I think it's less difficult.
Alright, so I will translate. In Urdu, sir, or in English? In English. It is really the greed which can never be satisfied. Whatever one believes one needs, in fact, is not correct. One's needs are strictly limited and very few. I believe Huzur Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Sahib understood the import of this. That's why we are.
Any other question, please? Yes, Dr. Mujibul Haq Sahib.
Sir, very respectfully, I seek clarification regarding the ethics of prayer, offering the prayer.
Clarification or clarification?
Clarification, just for my own sake. Sir, if we say, let's say, make intent or niyat, as we call it, to say nafl, and during the act of saying this nafl, I remember that I have to say the sunnah as well. Now, can I, sir, change my intent during that, or have to?
No, it's not possible. You finish your nafl and then say sunnah afterwards.
I see. Thank you.
Like a bullet fired, you can't change it halfway in the halfway flight. Yes, Malik Sahib, another Malik Sahib, but a different type of Malik.
When Anna sallallahu alayhi wa sallam defined the term riba, he mentioned 5 commodities like barley, wheat, dates, gold and silver.
Did you ask this question 2 years ago?
I don't think so. No links.
If I'm right, I remember further, please proceed further.
And he mentioned these commodities and he said as far as barter trade is concerned, in these commodities, we should still fulfill 2 conditions. And he said in Arabic, masalan, masalan, yadan, yadan. Otherwise, such a topic. So, I would like to ask the question is that according to the face value of this hadith, there are certain practices in Pakistan or anywhere which according to the normal economic moral standard, they are perfectly conceivable. But according to
Well, yes, you're right. I think this question was not asked. I understand it. Another question pertaining this about definition of riba was asked, but this will end up in the same, in fact. Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam has prohibited this as riba, declaring it to be riba, which means usury. The type of usury which is mentioned in the Holy Quran, which is forbidden for Muslims to indulge in, is a word of very wide application. And every act which contains the spirit of usury is also forbidden. And the spirit of usury, which has been described in the Holy Quran, is exploitation of the poor. So it is not just a fixed way of exploitation when you deposit some money with somebody, with some bank, and take interest on a certain rate, on a certain percentage. Or you give money to a poor person and charge him. It is not just that. Exploitation in any way of a person who is of necessity bound to accept your unequal terms. So some usury was also practiced in Arabia in those days in this form, and the same is practiced in slightly different form in our countries even today. In Sindh, for instance, at the time of the cotton crop or the wheat crop, this usury is practiced. It's given a different name. So when the farmer is in need of money, then the rich people exploit the farmer. Or when a farmer has a poor crop, a poor quality crop, and some rich people have very high quality crop, then they are also exploited. And this is the form which has been mentioned in the tradition that you just referred to. For instance, Date, for instance, is a staple diet of Arabia. It used to be, I mean. And at that time, some farmers had poor quality dates, and some rich people had every type of date, reaching the very excellent quality. And those poor farmers who wanted to eat the excellent quality dates for occasions, when they approached such farmers, they said, all right, we'll give you high quality dates, but for 1 kilo of high quality dates, we'll get 5 kilos of your date, and so on and so forth. Or when they were in need, they would say, we'll give you today this much dates, this much quantity of dates, and we'll take later on that much quantity of dates. So both these were forms of exploitation. So by reminding us that this is the usury which is forbidden in the Holy Quran, not just a form, but wherever the spirit of exploitation will be found, that will be forbidden under Islam. So Anand Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to make it clear to us, demonstrated it by this. That is to say, if somebody is richer and has better quality, he should also show kindness. He should exchange it at the same, with the same weight and immediately. So that if a high quality is thrown as a favor to some poor person, it's a good act. So that is promoted. I mean, not only exploitation is forbidden, but a better quality is sown into Muslims' culture and habits.
Those people who have been brought up in Pakistan, and particularly children, and then they have arrived in these Western countries, at least they have some exposure to the true teachings of Ahmadiyya because of the environment surrounding them. But unfortunately, those who are either born here or been brought up go to the schools where there is more Christianity and other sources. And the evidence of this comes about during the training class which we are holding in the Gospel for Tahir particularly, in the shape of some horrifying questions, some alarming questions which they raise. For example, why the Ahmadis are rich? Why? The Ahmadis, the non-Ahmadis are rich and building beautiful mosques. Why Ahmadis are not rich, and so on.
Why do you all those questions, horrible questions?
So in the sense that maybe
Inquiry which springs from an innocent mind is not fundamental at all.
It's only horrifying to us, maybe not to them. They are innocent questions to them as well. Yes, to an extent, because I like the answer. Maybe I think they could answer to them. Many more questions if you like to answer.
Are not difficult to give, but the question is, why did you have such reaction? This is what is worrying me.
Also, maybe
Questions should always be entertained normally, neutrally. No question, unless it is asked with bad intention, should be treated as a horrible question. Questions may arise in any direction, an investigating mind must not be suppressed. And the children's minds particularly should be encouraged to spell out whatever they feel.
So they humbly submit that the word horrifying I used is only my own maybe wrong word.
Perhaps what you wanted to say was that you were shocked at their lack of understanding such things as are normally understood in people who are brought up in Pakistan things. Is that right?
Hazur has understood my mind more than I could understand my own.
I hope so, yes.
And when we try to explain to them, of course, it seems that maybe it's the background, it's the attitudinal changes. My request is, how do we bring about this attitudinal change rather than giving a direct answer? What is that?
Everyone should be responsible for training. Look at this youngster Nori. Come here. He has been asking many questions here. Did you find any of his questions horrifying or not?
No, sir, most amusing and very interesting.
Were you brought up here in this country? You were born here? Yes, you tell me. It depends on the family. if you discharge your responsibilities well towards your own children, no such problems would occur. But most unfortunately, it is the parents who should be worried about, not the children in the first instance. If they are not very serious about their religion or their culture, their values, these things will happen. And these classes are held to complement their efforts. Sometimes they can put in some efforts, but not all. So to complement those efforts, such classes are held. So it's a continuous struggle. And I hope, inshallah, after participating in this class which you are referring to, they would come out to be, they will emerge as better children.
Maybe
than before, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah. Maybe I'm a bit impatient.
This is the answer, yes. Yes, please. How is your little child?
Thanks. So I was just wondering whether this viral disease which is nowadays very common in certain communities, AIDS, has some relationship with the calamity? Relationship or anything with the calamity which came upon Hazrat Lut's home?
Could have been, I don't know. Because I read in a paper, there was a very good research article on AIDS in a scientific magazine. And I read it very carefully. And there he mentioned that in bisexual people, this is more common. So that is exactly what you refer to. Bisexual means who have a heterosexual behavior. They go to women as well as to men to satisfy their urge. So that might have initiated from them. This is why perhaps it's more common among them. And maybe it's about a punishment from Allah for that very crime. Any questions? Palestine, yes? You're off duty tonight? You're off duty? When?
That's not it.
Do
this question of... Sorry?
Have you taken your breakfast?
Last night I was not at work, sir.
So you didn't take your breakfast this evening?
No, sir.
Because he sleeps whole day. Actually, breakfast time. Waiting in the evening. So exactly what happens.
About 3 o'clock I take my breakfast in the afternoon. This question of when some young children die very young before they become responsible for acting upon the Sharia. As I understand,
young children die very young. I have very young children die very young.
perhaps I should have put it another way, so that as I understand, a prophet will be sent to them at the time of Qiyamah. I may be wrong, but this is my understanding.
Prophets will be sent to them
At the time of Qiyamah.
Where did you learn this?
This must be a misunderstanding I have from this.
What is mentioned in the tradition is this, that Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was shown in a vision, Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, as a very tall figure, and by his side were so many children. So it was told to him by Jibreel alayhi salam that those children who die young, they are handed over to Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam to bring them up to the correct laws of Sharia and correct behavior, which they missed because they died young. So that means that it is important to go through the mill of Sharia to give proper development to your soul. If you die young, you still need that. And whatever you could not achieve here, through Allah's mercy, that is ingrained into you by some means for which Allah has chosen Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ to look after this school of training, whatever you may call it. This is the tradition which we read. But as far as your version is concerned, it is. I understood that prophets are sent to them. They may deny them, they may believe in them, and the whole process of acceptance and refusal begins all over again. This is not correct.
I have read in the book of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani Raziyallahu anhu, Rahe Najat, only Najat, that is some part of Tafsir al-Kabir. He quoted there from Tafsir al-Mani, that hadith, that those people who are Marful Kalam, those are brought to some prophet and they were treated as their belief at that time. I am certain that.
But in my government, in what direction they say, but I'm quite certain that this process of acceptance of prophets and rejection of them would not start in the day after.
There is some kind of.
I know, there might be some, the tradition has to be examined, maybe it's not correct, because you don't see even the remotest reference in either in the Holy Quran or accepted traditions. In Bukhari, in Sahih Sitta and other traditions. So this is, there must be some confusion. You better read it again, and if we find positive evidence from Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then I will certainly rectify my views.
I had a dream last night that I was teaching my small brother Nasser. I was teaching my small brother Nasser to swim when he drowned.
And when he drowned? You were teaching him how to swim?
Yes.
Don't teach him how to swim. Right?
What does that mean?
It's a warning to you. Don't take your brother lightly and don't try to teach him things which you can't handle yourself. You see? Inshallah, he won't be drowned, I assure you. Inshallah.
And I have another thing also, what's your reaction about the special people?
Very tragic. I felt for those who were, particularly those who were left behind, the children and their wives, mothers, sisters, all the relatives in particular, and also for whole of America. It was a very big tragedy. It was a national tragedy. As far as they are concerned, they wouldn't have known what happened to them. They were there and not there the next moment. So their fate is with Allah. And among them, there must be some who are doing it with a zeal to serve humanity. And if such are the people and among them are people who serve mankind in whatever way they think is best for mankind and offer sacrifices, and they do not have any crookedness among them. Such people will find their reward with Allah, whatever their religion is. So let's hope best for them who have parted, And as far as the treasury itself is concerned, every human being would feel for it. Why do you think I would feel otherwise than this? Why did you wonder? Why did you wonder that I could think otherwise than this? Did you think I would have jubilated and, exulted at this? No? What was your reaction?
I was quite sad.
We have let him go. It was a terrible tragedy. It helps to cut man down to his size as well. It not only had a dark aspect to it, it also has a silver lining. And that is to say, I hope America receives this message, that despite your great progress, you are still human beings. You are not free from errors and faults. And there is only one being who is beyond error, beyond fault, and that is Allah. So instead of submitting to Him at the time of this crisis, if they start thinking of other things and planning differently and receive a different reaction altogether, I think they have missed the message. So you better write to the President of America about it. Why don't you? Tell him that you have heard about the reactions, various reactions on television and that reports, and nowhere did you find the correct reaction which should have been first and foremost. Man is taught humility, and it is only with the grace of Allah that one can progress without stumbling on the way. So you should have, you write to him that you learn this message and be more humble and less proud of your achievements. Right?
Zur, I would like to, with your permission,
have you fully recovered now from the aftermath of the operation?
Yes, Alhamdulillah.
You see, they are weak.
Yes, Zur, it is, I have to see my consultant again in the near future, inshallah. Zur, I would like to let an observation was in my college quite a few days ago. There was an announcement that some ulama are coming in the college to preach the students to practice Islam, and I was waiting for it, the day will come and I will go and talk to them. There were two Maulvis from the Croydon Mosque, and one was student of law in some university, and he was also one of the, apparently looked like a Maulvi, full-fledged, with a beard, and he started.
That's the beard that you have in common with him.
Longer than me, sir. Longer than me, and
there's something on his, some pressure on his face.
Yes, sir.
Which you can't define.
Yes, I can't.
That's the way the rest of you is in now.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, just
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So he started pointing out the quality of the society and all this for quite some time, and I was listening to it along with the fellow students, and I asked them what is the remedy for that. You have not got remedy for these social evils, and can you relate to me that? He said, well, we should say our prayers, we should go to the mosque and stick to our Islamic practices. And I said, this is not the remedy which is related by Muhammad in this time. There is a person to come and he will again revive the whole Islamic teachings and encourage the Muslims to practice Islamic teachings. So he said, what's that? I said, Imam Mahdi, he has to come and we have to wait. Either you have to wait and I accepted one. And everybody was looking and thinking, who is that? I said, okay, I'll tell you, but let me ask him what he says. He said, Imam Mahdi has not yet come, and he will come, and he started saying that there will be the job and this sort of all these signs. I said, all these have not fulfilled.
Now instead of making the whole incident, it must have occupied a greater part of a few hours, I suppose. You just come to the point now.
Yes, sir. I said,
I know you must have had many things.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, and he said, okay, I will answer your question after these students will go out. So we stood there and when the discussion was very informal, then a few students who were interested in it, they came across and they also sat with us and we talked about it. And I related some verses from the Holy Quran about the Prophet and going to heaven of Isa al-Islam. So he said, Imam Mahdi has come for a long time. Why we don't see any sign of revival in Islam in general, and nobody is now Ahmadi at all in this, comparing the whole society. I said, the Holy Quran declares Nasru min Allah wa Fathul Kareem. Where is that? No Muslims in there in this society. Then the student of law, he became very interested in it because he didn't know anything about family. And I said, I related the sign of the donkey of Dajjal, and he said, oh yes, that is fulfilled. I said, what's that? He said, the traveling means of travel. I said, you are saying, but ask this Maurice, who is he was very curious on family. He didn't like that. And I took the addresses and he said, the Maurice said that we invite you to our mosque, come there and we will have a dinner and we'll talk and meet you after. I will be, inshallah, contacting that.
Go wearing an armor. Well, thank you very much. I am very pleased with your report and you handled the situation very admirably. With the grace of Allah, you opened up so many possibilities of tabligh, preaching to many others. That is how an Ahmadi should do. Allah bless you. So Bishiyama Sahib, you are also now attached to this department of audio-video, aren't you?
Yes, please.
Your bosses were speaking very highly of your efforts. I am very glad that you are contributing a lot. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
So this question is from ladies. Can you please explain if the sale or distribution of religious literature is allowed in the mosque in between the two azans before the Friday sermon, or should this time be strictly spent in quiet zikr-e-ilahi?
Why to restrict the question to this limited time? Those sales should take place in any mosque, be it religious literature or non-religious literature or anything else. Mosques are not meant for these things. So if anybody is violating the sanctity of mosque, whether he is a person or it is an organization, they have no right to do that. Outside the mosque, when people begin to disperse or when they are approaching the mosque, you can do whatever you please. But mosques are not for such things, and this practice must be forsaken from now on. Nobody should continue with such malpractices.
In certain part of the world, people go through sufferings for extraordinarily long period of time. And this is because of some sins or related to...
Not necessarily individually, I mean. But the Holy Quran speaks of such people, in larger groups, who suffer unnecessarily from many things because of their lack of attention to God, of their lack of turning to God. And the Holy Quran tells us that if the society as such had become pious, then many calamity may not have befallen them at all. And the society as such would be much better and more prosperous. Baldatun tayyibatun barabbun ghafur. This is where this description culminates. This is how it culminates. So, largely speaking, when the whole society has become sinful, many suffering automatically crops up from that state of crime. And people begin to suffer not necessarily individually for a certain crime which they have committed, but because the whole social setup has become criminal. The whole society has become criminal. So the innocent might suffer then because it's the law of large numbers then which that operates. And in that no distinctions are made of who has committed a crime and how he should be punished. The social punishments are then common for everybody. And the Holy Quran also speaks of this. It tells us that beware of that calamity which will not discriminate between the pious and the unpious. Such calamities are these larger scale calamities which are created by human society themselves. It may mean something else as well, but this is also what it means. For instance, the suffering here in Britain and other parts of Europe and other Western societies, if you analyze them, a great majority of those sufferings are caused by human evils. Despite the fact that they are prosperous, they are well-to-do societies, they have no reason to indulge in crime. I mean, that is to say, no compulsion. Like in some poor societies, people are compelled to indulge in some crimes, although still you can't justify that, but there is some reason somehow. Somebody is poor, dying of hunger, if he steals a few things, somehow it can be justified a little bit at least. But in such rich societies, prosperous societies where Allah has provided them with everything, most of the crimes committed here are unnecessary crimes. And most of the evils faced by the society of today here is because of man-made situations. And when these crimes go beyond a certain limit, then the whole society begins to suffer, and then you can't discriminate between the innocent person and the criminal person. The suffering may be shared by an innocent person, and an evil person may remain scot-free for a while, but as a whole, the whole society begins to suffer. So this is what's happening nowadays. You know, these most horrible crimes of killing of small children and looting and drug addiction and the resultant crimes, dependent on drug addiction initially. So many nowadays. As I told earlier, I once happened to see a program on crime, And an experienced police officer who was responsible for that particular branch gave it on authority, on his personal experience, indicating a certain town that in this town, every third house is a seat of crime, where the crime of this particular nature, that is, what do we call, when they are criminal to children, they do child abuse. Every third house is an arena for child abuse, ranging from small abuse to very big, most horrible abuses. And he said before he was attached to this branch, every third, every seventh, I don't remember exactly. I think last time I spoke here, then it was fresh in my memory. But let's call it every seventh even. That is a very big percentage. Every seventh house being a seat of unseen crime, of child abuse. And children are sometimes maimed, sometimes killed, sometimes they suffer from psychological traumas which last a life. And then they showed some interviews of such people who were indulging in such crimes. Their faces were covered by some masks, and shamefacedly they said, yes, we'll do this and we'll do that, and this is all right. And some people admitted that we have been doing it for 30 years. They were brought from jails for this particular interview, or perhaps the person who interviewed them went to jail. And also those were shown who suffered at the hands of such criminals, and some of them were in a very bad, very rotten shape. They had lost interest in everything. Those who were sexually abused, they said they are horrified with the idea of sex. It's a terror for them now to even to think of it. So they were to live single lives all their lives because of such crimes having been perpetrated upon them, not only by unrelated people, by parents sometimes, by fathers. And such fathers gave their interview and they said it was all right. What is this? This is the crime of the whole society. So those also suffer who know or learn of these things. Not only those suffer who go through the experience, but the whole society aches. This is what I mean. That human crime sometimes is responsible for these large-scale sufferings. And generally in prosperous society, this is the main reason. Natural calamities are responsible for only a very small percentage of total human suffering. Mostly it is man-made suffering which we experience in this age. Thank you.
In Glasgow there is a Shia family with whom we have nowadays entered into discussion about Ahmadiyyat. And there are three of those people, and three of our Ahmadi brethren. We constantly have these meetings with them, almost every month. There are lists of questions, which of course I'm not going to relate them. But one of the questions, out of those lists we try to answer some of them satisfactorily. And for some we are still seeking some advice from our elders or answers. One of the questions which they pose is that the Imam Mahdi, the one who has to come according to them, who is arrived at the moment and so on, should be from the Ahl Bayt. To the very limited knowledge of people as we try to answer them with relation to the hadith of Hazrat Salman Farsi and so on. So could you kindly please give some more light on that? What is the actual meaning of this?
Already explained this. All the Shias believe that Hazrat Salman Farsi was Ahl Bayt. And they also know and believe that he had no blood relationship whatsoever with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why was he Ahle Bayt? That is the question. Because Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam declared him to be Ahle Bayt. So he is the authority. If he declares somebody to be Ahle Bayt, who is there in the world to say no, he is not? So that also explains the scope of the word Ahle Bayt. One thing is positively established. For somebody to be Ahle Bayt, it is not essential to be a blood relation. If that first step is not covered, then you can't believe him to be Ahle Bayt. First decide the issue here. The moment you bring them home, the truth of the reality of this, the further questions will automatically dissolve into thin air. Make them realize that it is not essential for an Ahle Bayt to be a blood relation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If it is essential, then Salman Farsi was not an Ahle Bayt. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So make it clear to them as such. Once they begin to realize the significance of this tradition, the following questions will not appear at all. It would also be signified to them that piety of somebody also makes him eligible for this great distinctive honor of being called Ahle Bayt. So that honor was bestowed by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon Salman Farsi. And when he mentioned of his recoming to the world, in the world, according to the prophecy of the Holy Quran, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. When he recited this verse, and some of those present asked this question, who would be that fortunate person, or those fortunate persons who are mentioned in this? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam put his hand on the shoulder of Hazrat Salman Farsi and said, even if the faith had deserted the earth and risen to Hades, from among these people would be some who would bring it back from the Hades to the earth. Again, the shoulder of that gentleman was chosen by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was declared by him to be an Ahle Bayt. So the future Ahle Bayt was also to be of that kind, and from his people. This is what it signifies. So it's very clear to us. There is nothing, no ambiguity at all whatsoever.
It is here from the ladies' side. Someone has written regarding the previous question and setting up literature in the mosque, that ladies only use the Mahmud Hall or the Usrat Hall as mosque for Friday prayers. What will be the position in these halls?
It is not a mosque, it is not a mosque. But during the time it is used as a place of worship, no disturbance should be permitted in that particular time, during that particular period. Yes? I'm sorry, I forgot you. Oh. Yes, we have still 3 minutes to go.
Illegal exports of drugs from Pakistan have become a problem for the government of Pakistan and for the countries in the world these days, I shall be grateful if Hazur most kindly advise us that why the
when the question came, it seemed to me it had no relationship with the base. As if you are preparing your base here and building the question here in the air. Why did you suddenly switch over to alcohol while establishing the fact that Pakistan was one of the countries from which drugs were exported to the rest of the world?
Alcohol is also one of vices. Alcohol is also...
So without bringing the bad name to Pakistan unnecessarily, ask this question as such. Why to blame poor Pakistan for this?
No, recently there was a film shown on the BBC regarding...
You are a good chef. You are a good Pakistan.
No, I say this is problem for the government of Pakistan, I said it. I
don't believe that either. It is a bad name brought to Pakistan, and maybe it's the doing of some government of Pakistan as well. If a government is meaningful and wants to put her foot down, this evil would not have been permitted to develop to this giant size. So the government can't be absolved of this responsibility. It is not the problem created by some other factors which is being now dumped upon the government. It may be otherwise. But the whole issue is irrelevant. There are so many other countries responsible for such vices, and in some countries it is the government itself which is running all these things. In many countries, the government is involved at some stages, either officially involved or unofficially involved. But that is not relevant to the question you have asked. That is to say, why alcohol is forbidden.
No, I said not wording it. I'm not talking about against anything regarding Pakistan, because I'm born in Pakistan and I got love for Pakistan. I'm not against the Pakistan, but I said this has become a problem for the government of Pakistan. I said in my question as well.
I will explain that.
Regarding alcohol, I said that this is one of the vices which is prohibited and all this. And my question is that
now I follow. You mean to say that although alcohol is forbidden, drugs are not forbidden. They are forbidden. So what is the question then?
Any vice is forbidden, but I wanted to know something regarding drugs. Illegal drugs. If there is anything regarding that is the issue.
You already said that drugs are forbidden according to Islam.
They are forbidden.
So, what is the question?
Regarding the dealers, producers and dealers.
The same applies to the drug dealers as applies to the alcohol dealers. Their fate will not be different. Well, all right, you can ask another question. Now that you are a full-time employee, why don't you think of some questions which hold water?
So before I start this one, I want to state again, request so that I'm in no way wanting to disregard Pakistan or the people of Pakistan. In the recent years, some of the organizations and people who were opposed to the making of Pakistan have come in the forefront to share the power in running of the authority in Pakistan. I shall be grateful if Hazur knows kindly throw some light on the following questions. Why and when some of the organizations and the people who were responsible responsible for the making of Pakistan lacked control of the affairs of the government of the country. Whether this change happened before or after the separation of East Pakistan, now called Bangladesh. Third, what is now the position of the remaining persons who were the patrons who supported Qaid-e-Azam, late Muhammad Ali Jinnah Sahib, in the cause of demanding a separate Muslim state of Pakistan?
So let's go back to the first question. Please, one by one. The first part.
Why and then some of the organizations and the people who were responsible for the making of Pakistan lacked control of the affairs of the government of the country?
I think the debate started with the change in the attitude of Muslim League itself in the Punjab. The first Muslim League government which can be blamed for this change is the government of unfortunately Mr. Doltana, who I understand repented later on, but it was too late for him to repent. He brought religion into politics to gain certain political ends. He exploited religion of Islam, and for that Ahmadiyya Jamaat was chosen as a scapegoat. Now when religion was exploited, any person or a leader who exploits religion has to do it with the help and aid of theocracy, mullacracy I should say. So that is exactly what happened. Those were the enemies of Pakistan. Those were the people who opposed the concept of Pakistan tooth and nail, and to the very limit of their potentials. They were totally frustrated by Qaid-e-Azam with the grace of Allah, and the first time they were admitted entry into politics of Pakistan was then in 1953 or slightly prior to 1953 by unfortunately the Muslim League government, and that was the last of Muslim League we see in the politics of Pakistan. After that they lost all control of the affairs of Pakistan, and then it was a chaos, a free for all. Whoever wanted to come to power, usurp power, he could do it at any excuse or whenever given opportunity. So no principle was left from them on. This is the punishment in that.
The second part is also, I think, it discovers whether the change happened before or after the separation. Only the last one. What is now the position of the remaining persons who were the patrons who supported Qaid-e-Azam, late Muhammad Ali Jinnah Sahib, in the cause of demanding a separate Muslim state of Pakistan?
They have been totally ousted from Pakistan politics at present. Completely. Because, they cannot coexist with mullacracy. Because it is exactly what Qaid-e-Azam opposed. Pakistan was not created for mullahs, for religious orthodoxy of the most terrible type, which had nothing to do with Islam. So these medieval darknesses, which have been unfortunately given the name of Islam, which have no relationship with the light of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at this time that is being imposed upon Pakistan in the name of Islam. And those who stood for Pakistan, who sacrificed all they had for the sake of Pakistan, who suffered for Pakistan, they are left aside as enemies of Pakistan, you being among them. You were the foremost who worked for the creation of Pakistan, and now you are dubbed as anti-state, anti-Islam and all with that nonsense. So is the fate of true lovers of Pakistan, all of them. They are suffering it with us because they cannot reconcile or cannot compromise their principles with the present regime in this sense. So if there is any short question which would cover, for which the answer should be longer than 5 minutes, apart from you please. Yes? No? You want? Yes please. Why don't you raise your hand beyond the height of your nose? Because you take it up to here and then stop. So I get not confused,
In one of the Majalati Irfan, Hazur mentioned that the Islamic concept of state, according to what I understood, the Islamic concept of state does not belong to the realm of facts, but it merely sets an ideal before us which should regulate our conduct. That it is not meant to be achieved to this maximum capacity of life. According to IS, yes.
What I might have said would be that an ideal is set for people and no ideal can be perfectly achieved. That is a different thing altogether. But the ideal itself is perfect due to human shortcomings, due to human failings. An ideal is not achieved, but it does not mean that the ideal is unnecessary. Greater the ideal, greater would be the relevant effort of people to reach that ideal, that goal. So higher the goal is set, unless it totally frustrates one and defeats his spirit. Unless that happens, the higher the goal of an ideal is, better it is to people, because they have to rise higher. And for that purpose, they have to put in greater effort. That is, not in these words, but that is what I might have meant, but I may have, conveyed vaguely, so that you got a wrong impression. All right, the rest tomorrow, inshallah.